Welcome to my channel. In today's video, the receptionist almost tossed the application into the stack without looking up. It was another Monday morning. Another line of people hoping for work at one of the largest real estate companies on the California coast. But when the application reached the executive office an hour later, the billionaire CEO stopped in the middle of signing contracts. She stared at one line for so long that her assistant quietly asked if something was wrong. It wasn't the man's experience. It wasn't his address. It was his name. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Digital Story Corner. The morning fog still covered most of Harbor Point when Rowan Hale parked his aging pickup beside a grocery store. The truck rattled every time he shut off the engine, but it had carried him through 12 years without complaint. In the back seat, his 8-year-old son, Bram, finished a peanut butter sandwich while reading a library book about whales. "You'll miss the bus," Rowan said gently. "I'm on the last page." Bram smiled, closed the book, and climbed out. His backpack looked almost as old as the truck. Rowan had stitched one strap after it ripped over the winter. They walked together to the school gate. "How's your cough?" "Better." Children poured through the entrance while parents hurried toward work. Rowan waited until his son disappeared inside, then returned to the truck. His workday no longer existed. 3 weeks earlier, the maintenance company where he'd spent nearly 15 years lost its biggest contract, and half the crew was laid off. Rowan packed his tools into a cardboard box, shook hands with men he'd worked beside for years, and drove home wondering how long his savings would last. Rent, insurance, school supplies, and his father's medical bills all arrived at once. For the first week, he told himself another maintenance job would appear. Didn't. Every interview ended the same way. "We'll keep your resume." Nobody called. That Monday, pride gave way to bills, so he drove toward Argent Holdings, a luxury property company managing hotels, towers, and estates along the coastline. Their site listed an opening: janitorial services, full-time, benefits after 90 days. He had once repaired boilers and supervised crews across buildings larger than most shopping centers. Now he was applying to clean hallways. The glass building overlooking the marina felt polished enough to make him aware of the faded elbows on his jacket. He almost turned around. Instead, he took a breath and stepped inside. The receptionist slid a clipboard across the counter without much interest. "Application." "Yes, ma'am." He sat among 3 other applicants, filling in employers, emergency contacts, education, references. At the line for his full legal name, he wrote carefully, Rowan Elias Hale. When he returned the clipboard, she said it might take a few days. At the exit, an employee hurried over. "The facilities manager wants to meet applicants today." "I have plenty of time," Rowan said, almost laughing at how true that was. The waiting room overlooked the harbor, sailboats drifting under circling gulls. After 20 minutes, a stocky man named Victor Keene appeared, reading glasses balanced on his nose. "You've done more than janitorial work," he said, studying the application. "So why apply?" "I need steady work." Victor nodded like he'd heard that before. "We like honesty here." The interview covered schedules, equipment, and safety. As Rowan rose to leave, Victor smiled. "You seem overqualified. We'll be making decisions soon." Rowan thanked him and headed to the parking lot, already thinking about the next application across town. Life didn't pause because hope felt uncertain. On the top floor, CEO Maris Eloyne was finishing a merger review before her afternoon board meeting, noticing only spreadsheets and deadlines now, running a company of 12,000 employees across 4 states. Her assistant brought in folders needing signatures, executive hires, internships, routine hiring paperwork under the company's Veteran Employment Initiative. Most passed beneath her eyes in seconds, until one didn't. Her pen stopped. She read the name again. Rowan Elias Hale. "Everything all right?" the assistant asked. Maris stared through the window toward the harbor, where sunlight was finally breaking through the fog. That name hadn't crossed her desk in 18 years. "It can't be," she whispered. "Do you know him?" "I knew someone with that name. Not just someone. A family, a rainy afternoon, a repair shop, a promise she'd never repaid." Memories buried under decades of meetings returned with uncomfortable clarity. "Ask HR to hold this application. I want to meet the applicant myself." "For a janitor position?" Maris only nodded. Personally. Far below, Rowan drove home with no idea that a single line of handwriting had interrupted the busiest day of one of the wealthiest women on the coast. He assumed his application would vanish into another stack of paperwork. At home, he found Bram on the steps helping a neighbor untangle spilled knitting yarn. Rowan smiled and carried the groceries inside, past a reminder note pinned to the fridge with a faded lighthouse magnet. Across town, Maris was opening an old wooden box she hadn't touched in years, searching for something tied to a name she thought she'd never see again. The cedar box had moved with her through 3 headquarters and more years than she liked to count. Inside were ordinary things: a motel keycard, a coffee-stained map, a small compass, and, tucked in an envelope, a receipt from a repair shop, Hale Family Auto Service. The ink had faded, but the name remained. 18 years earlier, Maris hadn't been a billionaire. She'd been 26, trying to keep a struggling construction startup alive after investors backed out, when her sedan broke down during a storm on the way to meet the one client who could save her company. The shop was closing for the night, but a man named Elias Hale reopened the garage after seeing her stranded. She apologized for being unable to pay the full bill until the following week. Elias only smiled. "Get to your meeting. Pay me when life settles down." Life never settled down. Her business took off within months. By the time she returned, the shop had closed. Someone nearby said the owner had fallen ill and the family had moved away. She mailed a check to the old address. It came back unopened, and work swallowed the memory. Now, staring at the application, she noticed the emergency contact beneath Rowan's name. Elias Hale. The same name. She pressed the intercom. "Schedule Mr. Hale for another interview tomorrow morning." Rowan almost ignored the unfamiliar number the next morning. "This is Rowan." "Good morning, Mr. Hale. Human Resources at Argent Holdings. The CEO would like to meet you today." "The CEO? There must be some mistake." "There isn't. 10 o'clock. I'll be there." Bram looked up from his cereal. "Good news." "I honestly don't know." The executive floor felt even quieter than he expected, thick carpets softening every footstep. The office was larger than his apartment, but the woman behind the desk didn't seem intimidating. She stood instead of remaining seated. "You must be Rowan Hale. Your father, is his name Elias?" "It is." Maris looked down before smiling, sadness lingering behind it. "I hoped I wasn't mistaken. Your father helped me once, long before we imagined we'd end up here." She told him the story plainly. Rowan smiled faintly. "That sounds like him. Is he well?" "He has heart problems now, good days and bad days. He still fixes lawnmowers for neighbors, even though I keep telling him to slow down." They both laughed, and it eased the room. Maris reached into a drawer and placed the faded receipt on the desk. "I've carried this for years." Rowan stared at it. "I haven't seen our shop logo since I was a teenager. I owed your father more than this receipt." "You don't owe us anything," he said. "My dad never helped people expecting something back." The words settled over the room. Maris understood that offering Rowan a job out of old debt would turn his father's kindness into a transaction, and that wasn't what Elias believed in. She slid the receipt back into its envelope. "I won't insult either of us by pretending sentiment should replace qualifications. I reviewed your history. You've supervised teams, trained apprentices, managed commercial systems. Why apply for janitorial work?" "Because that's where the opening was, and I needed work." "I respect that answer." Instead of ending the meeting, Maris brought in the facilities director. They talked building systems, energy costs, and safety, and Rowan answered naturally, because it was work he'd spent most of his life doing. "We've been trying to solve that ventilation issue for months," the director said. Rowan shrugged. "It needs a different schedule, not new equipment." She scribbled notes. Maris watched quietly. She wasn't seeing a janitor applicant anymore, but someone who'd nearly stopped believing in his own experience because unemployment pushed him toward whatever job kept food on the table. When the meeting ended, she stood. "I don't think the janitor position is the right fit." Rowan forced a polite smile. "I understand. I wasn't finished." She handed him another folder. "We have an opening for assistant regional maintenance supervisor. It pays more, includes health insurance immediately, and requires the experience you've spent years building." "I didn't apply for this. I know enough to offer you an interview," she said, smiling. "It happened during the last hour." For a moment Rowan sat there, not overwhelmed, but unfamiliar with someone noticing what he could do instead of the title he'd applied for. "Are you offering this because of my father?" "I'm offering it because you're qualified," Maris said, "and because your father once reminded me to see the person in front of me before judging the situation." That let Rowan accept without feeling charity replace dignity. Weeks later, Bram visited headquarters during a family day, wandering the workshop in oversized safety glasses while Rowan introduced him around. Maris passed by, and Bram thanked her for hiring his dad. "I think your dad earned that himself," she said. Then he pulled out a drawing. A small repair shop, a tall office building, two people shaking hands, and above it, in uneven handwriting, "Kindness travels farther than we think." Maris asked to keep it, framed it, and set it on a bookshelf instead of behind her desk. Visitors who asked about it got the same answer. "It reminds me not to overlook ordinary people." Months passed. Rowan settled into his new role not perfectly. He occasionally misjudged schedules, but he owned every mistake and fixed it, and the people under him respected that. His father recovered enough to visit, bringing homemade oatmeal cookies for the crew because, as he liked to say, people work better after a decent cookie. One afternoon, Maris met Elias in person. He had no idea who she was until she mentioned the rainy night years before, and he smiled with the same calm kindness she remembered. "I figured things worked out for you." They did. There was no grand reunion, just two people sharing coffee while watching workers replace flower beds outside. Before leaving, Elias looked toward Rowan and his crew. "He almost didn't apply here. I'm glad he did. So am I." Sometimes kindness doesn't pay off right away. It circles back years later, not as repayment, but as a chance to notice someone who might otherwise be overlooked. Comment: kindness still exists, if you believe one good act can change someone's life. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. The best opportunities begin when someone looks beyond a job title, a worn jacket, or a hard season. Kindness doesn't erase hardship, but it reminds people of their worth, and that's where a better future begins.